Give me those jazz hands.
Brought to you by Scoobly Doodly Doo. Today we are talking about great songs that are not necessarily hits. And in some cases they may be B-side cuts. They may be from albums that were lesser known, or they may just be songs that were on a well-known album that maybe just didn't get as much airplay or are not as highly recognized as perhaps an artist's best-known hits. So these are kind of the non-hits that are still great tunes.
Cool. Go for it. Let's hear your track.
All right. So the first one that I'm going to put up today is actually from James Taylor. And we have played some James Taylor on our show before. Just a great artist to go to. And last time, I believe we played Fire and Rain, which is probably his best known tune, maybe, or, you know, if it's not the best known tune, it's one of his top 5 probably. And I'm going to play something from an album that is not one of his best selling albums. The album is called Walking Man. And I happen to really like this album. I think it's a gem. And I don't know why it wasn't one of his biggest selling albums, but you know, it's a mystery. It's not always about the quality of the music, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. It's not always about the quality of the music that determines whether or not an album is a hit or not. And it has to do with oftentimes with a lot of other factors. But I think this album is great. I love the whole album, but this is just one track that really spoke to me. And it's called Ain't No Song.
There ain't no melody, and I can't find a harmony. And if there were a way to say it, you know I would have played it. I'm a man of few words, trying to find a rhyme. And finally it's occurred to me that I'm wasting my time. There ain't no rhyme or reason, there ain't no time or season, there ain't no way around it. I know I would have found it. There ain't no song in the whole wide world sing about you. It ain't no song in the whole wide world tell you the way that I feel. Painters use their eyes to show us what they see. When that canvas dries, we all see it differently. There ain't no black or white. No day or night, there ain't no way around it. I know I would have found it. There ain't no song in the whole wide world hardly sing about you. There ain't no song in the whole wide world tell you the way that I feel. Have
All right.
I've never heard that song before.
No kidding. All right.
And I'm a James Taylor fan.
Yeah. What do you think?
So my instinct tells me that it was recorded in the early 80s. And it sounds like a live band. And they added the horns, at least a live rhythm section. But it's weird. I've never heard that song before. It's a really nice tune. Is it early 80s?
It's 74.
Oh my gosh, dude, 74. I was like a decade off.
But yeah, and actually I've just checked this album out recently because my wife and I were driving along, and I was looking for Your Smiling Face. You know that tune. That's one of his really well known.
See your smiling face.
Yeah, it's a great tune. But we were driving, and we were stopped, and so I just picked a James Taylor album, and I thought that was the one, and I put on Walking Man, and from the first track, I was like, oh my gosh, I really like this album, and just like every cut on this album is really good. And so, like, this is not revisiting something. This is something that I kind of discovered recently.
Wow.
And James Taylor has quite a library of material out there. He recorded a lot. And this album is just really good. To me, it's like, this is a masterpiece. Why didn't I know about this? It's a really good album.
Wow, 74.
And the only thing I can figure is it's just one of those things where I think oftentimes the albums that are well known by everybody it's just about exposure, and this is a few years after Fire and Rain, right? I think that was that 1970, that album, that song was originally?
Not very far removed from that. And you would think that, and that's another thing that occurs to me, when you said it was 74, you would think there would be a lot more folk elements, but there's not. There's some gospel elements in this, and like a full band, but it's not, I wouldn't call this acoustic music anymore. This is more rock, gospel, kind of driving music. It's not Sweet Baby James. It's none of that.
And it could be that because of that, maybe that's why this album wasn't as much of a hit. Maybe people felt it was a departure from what they knew about him and what they were used to. And listening to this album too, I mean, I think there are some hooks in there, but every song is really kind of a composition, and it goes places. And so for a musician, to me, it's a really interesting album to listen to. It's just very rich. And he goes through different styles on this album too, but it's all very identifiable still as James Taylor. So my only guess could just be that maybe people were James Taylored out by that point. He became a big hit, and for whatever reason, this album just didn't get the traction. But to me, it doesn't diminish the fact that it's a great album. It's just not recognized. And that's why I thought about this would be a great show to do today, to talk about those songs, because I think there are songs out there that are just really good, really interesting songs that are not the best known songs of these artists. And it's important to get it out there, to share about this music, because it's worth listening to. Man, if I hadn't just accidentally sort of stumbled across this album when I was looking for something else, I might never have heard it. And now that I've heard it, man, I really like this album. It's really good. Highly recommend checking out the whole album. Walking Man, check out the whole thing. Every track has something worth listening to.
Yeah, I've never heard the song before. It's and me being a James Taylor fan, I don't have every album, but it's not acoustic. It's not like an acoustic kind of thing. Even when he plays with the whole band and you can hear his acoustic guitar, that's his sound, but this one's different. It's got a horn section, has some gospel elements, and very different, but it's very rich. Great songwriting in it.
It's got that rhythm guitar with a wah pedal on it. I mean, there's some 70s sounding aspects to it, but and I have to say, and you've known me for a long time. You know that I love the funk. I love that sound. And this song it's not quite funk, but there's a funkiness to it with that rhythm guitar, with the horn lines, and there's a bass trombone in there that, like at the bottom, it fills out these horn arrangements, and it just really nice harmonies, really very nice writing on the horns.
Yeah.
And there's a Fender Rhodes. I love the sound of the Rhodes, how it fits in there. Yeah. This is right up my alley. And the album, the production on this album, this is just like, man, that's why I say, like, how did I not know about this album? Because it is just what I like. It's right up the alley of what's in my taste, what really kind of speaks to me. So. Yeah,
that's cool. Thanks for sharing it. This is why we do this show. Like, we share music most of the time that each of us has never heard of. And it's like, did you hear that before? I've never heard of it before. So that's the cool thing about it. Okay, so this next tune is a Chris Cornell tune. And I remember a few episodes back, we were talking about that tune, Sun Shower. That I remember listening to that tune way back in 2001, 2000. And when I compare it to listening to it now, I think it's even better. And it stood the test of time for me. And this is off the same album of Sun Shower. This is off of that album called Euphoria Morning. And this is definitely a B-side. It's just mainly him and acoustic. And the thing I like about it, which is unusual, is the whole phrasing of the song. I don't know if you could call it an AABA structure. It's very rubato. There are some places where the harmony doesn't make sense. It sounds like the lowest string on his guitar is off by a whole step, and you'll know when that happens. And it's a sad song. It sounds like he's slightly under the influence of something. And it's a song about being under the influence and being a slave to that. Something like that. But interesting melody, and obviously it's not very radio friendly, but it's a gem. So this is called Sweet Euphoria by Chris Cornell.
Sweet Euphoria, man, it's the heart you own. Lost the grace of the hands that harmed you in the days of 1,000 young. Lost my love and it is I'm truly gone. In your morning I will sleep far on an open palm. Death for Jesus and plastic armies wouldn't bring me back again. Sweet as ether as I'm blind to them. And in your aching hour, time wilts like flowers, sleeping on lemon pillows. Tired angels save my love for the lasting.
Okay, so that's once through the whole form, and that's a very interesting form, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's definitely not AABA.
No. And did you hear that? Like the guitar, the harmony sounded not off, but it sounded like the bass note was like down a whole step, but he played that harmony on purpose.
Yeah. It adds some dissonance to it. It's very interesting.
It's cool. It's not like harsh dissonance, but it's like, whoa, there's something there. And so far they've repeated some things, and there's like at least 3 or 4 sections. And now we're going to go back to the verse again, if we can call it that. Sweet Euphoria. Here it is again.
Sweet euphoria. Mine is a heart you stole, touched and broken now the things you loved, using the stars to light your candles. Once my face, but I can't remember yours. Gone to your dandelion, falling like mine, falling like daydream mangoes, diving swallows. Save my love, save my love, save my love, lasting one. Sweet euphoria.
Yeah. Does that create a picture? What kind of vibe do you get off of that tune?
I definitely I hear some pain
Yeah.
in there. Yeah. And it's interesting because the song, it's you can kind of hear that it starts off in a major chord, and it's like there's this positivity and there's this high, if you will, and then it builds tension, and the way it goes through the chord changes, it takes a darker turn, and so it's interesting. But it seems to kind of go in and out of this brighter sound to a darker sound, and so it's almost like it's pushing and pulling, and yeah, it's very interesting, and I can hear it's like an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah. It's as I said before we played it, it's very rubato, isn't it? It's like the tempo is not fixed, even though it's like dong go gong go gong go. It's got a slight swing to it, but there's at the end of phrases there's some slowing down, and then they add that guitar on the last verse, if you call it a verse. But basically that's it, and then that last chord is kind of out of phase. They slightly did it out of phase just to give this unsettling kind of vibe to it. And it's just it's like goes on, and then a completely different section. Da ba da da dum, ba da da dum, ba da 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 dum. It's interesting, like they somehow seem that they wouldn't work together, but they do, and the melodies are really interesting. And I mean, I'm not surprised it didn't get a lot of airplay, and this whole album unfortunately didn't get much, but this definitely did not. And you could call this a B-side.
Beautiful tune.
Yeah. Pain.
Yeah.
There's pain there, though. There's struggling with this some kind of maybe substance abuse or something that's, but you can, and we've talked about this several times before. You can hear an artist when they sing a song, whether it be a cover or theirs, that has this element to it, and you can really tell that they've been through it, and it's an intangible that only time brings, and heartache and good times and bad times bring that intangible element. So this is definitely the case with this one.
Yeah. And that low note, I believe that's a diminished chord. It sounded, when you played it, the second part of it, it sounded like a low voiced diminished chord. And so it's like the bottom whole step of that diminished chord was kind of.
It could be, it's really interesting. The voicing of that, if it's a diminished chord, is really funky. I haven't analyzed it, but it could be. It's a strange voicing. Mm-hmm. This has got no airplay on it. It's like, whoa, why did you? That's great that he chose that. That voicing on that. That's unusual.
Yep, and I've definitely never heard that before. So we're on a roll here.
1 for 1. Yeah, what you got for us next?
Well, next I've got something from Genesis, but this is Genesis unlike any Genesis you've heard. And this, let me say first how I know about this song. This is one that I'm revisiting. I heard the song a long time ago when I was a kid, actually. And then I kind of went back and revisited it. And when I was a kid, I liked it because there's an interesting, some kind of I'm not sure what instrument it is, but it's some kind of a whistle or a flute, like it's not a piccolo, but it would be some kind of a wind instrument. It sounds like maybe a wooden flute or something like that. That's very small. And I just liked the sound of that. But when I went back and listened to it as an adult, as a musician, I realized this song is incredible because there's a lot happening in this song. And at a musical level, it's just a really interesting song. And there's no hook in this song, though. So, if anybody's looking for a hook, looking for a hit, this ain't that song, because there really is not a hook in the song. I mean, there are some repetitive sections that I think are catchy, but this song will never in a million years get airplay. So, and when I play it for you, you'll understand why. But I like the song. I really enjoy it. And let's check it out. So this is called Dance on a Volcano.
crosses are blue. Your friends didn't make it through. Out of the night and out of the dark, into the fire and into the fight. Well, that's the way the heroes go. Ho, ho, ho. Through a crack in Mother Earth, blazing hot, the molten rock spills out over the land. is the lover who licks your boots away. Hey, you don't want to fall as well, but better start the dance. Do you wanna dance with me? You better start doing it right. Music's playing, the notes are right. Put your left foot first and move into the light. The edge of this hill is the edge of the world. And if you're gonna cross, you better start doing it right. Better start doing it right. You better start doing it right.
You ever heard Genesis like that?
Yeah, I've heard that song before.
Oh, you have heard that song. Okay. Hey,
Yes.
finally, I have not stumped you.
And it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds to me like it's later Genesis. Obviously, it doesn't have Peter Gabriel anymore.
Yeah, I think it's right about at the changeover. And this is late 70s, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. And I think the main guitarist in this one is Steve Hackett. Do you know from our past episodes the connection we have to Steve Hackett? Do you remember?
I don't. You have to
Remember
clue
that
me in.
band GTR, my first concert? He was the guitarist in that one.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So, man, all of these bands are connected, aren't they? All the bands that we love, there's some kind of connection there.
Yeah, great musicians that they have in common. And man, this track, it just reminds me of what a great drummer Phil Collins is as well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just
And the drum sound they got off of that is fantastic. It's a nice, warm drum sound, but it cracks. It's got that crack to it.
it does. Yeah, it's amazing. And man, he's just playing these odd time signatures like it's so natural, you know, and it just feels great. Most of the song is in 7/8. It sounds like some parts kind of alternate between 7/8 and 6/8, or it might be 13/8, I guess. And it's a composition and just really interesting stuff happening. And the last part of it sounds like it could be Return to Forever or something. I mean, just really complicated. And
yeah, it's not too crazy. It's got that hook. I mean, we said that maybe it doesn't have a chorus to it, but I think there is some kind of what the guitarist is playing in there. Better start doing it. That's hooky. That's the hook right there. The whole thing. It's like,
Yes.
that's how what identified it to me. Is like, oh, I've heard this before.
Yeah, and that's I was going to say the same thing, that for me the hook is that line, that guitar line. And you know, the other thing too that I noticed listening to this now on a really good pair of headphones is I don't think there's a flute in there. I always thought it was a flute, but I don't think it is. At the very beginning, there's that bump, bump. I think it's actually a high guitar note that just the frequencies of it make it sound kind of like it's a flute. But I don't think it is a flute.
It could be a synth. It might be some kind of flute though. Still, I don't know. It might be a synth. But I see what you're saying. I was listening for it too. They wanted to make it sound like a flute or some kind of piccolo.
Yeah, and it has that effect. But listening to it, I don't think it is. I always assumed that it was, but now I'm not sure that it is. It sounds. It actually does sound like it's a processed guitar note. And let me just play that part of it once again, just the beginning of it, and I think you'll hear what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it may be a guitar, it may be a synth. It could be a synth because there's a Moog synthesizer that I hear at the end of the tune, and it could be that the guitar and the Moog are doubling that note. But I don't think it's a flute. I thought it was, but I'm not sure.
Maybe they brought it up an octave or octaves because it's super high. It's like way up there. I don't know why they added it. It's cool, but I mean, do they absolutely need it? It's interesting. I think I would have to listen to it several times to. Then you never hear it again. It's just at the beginning of the tune. You never hear it again after that.
I think the guitar is using an octave pedal though, because at the very end of the song, you can hear him kind of going back and forth with it to get an effect. Did you notice that at the end of the tune?
I can't remember the end. It's just there's so many sections I was trying to keep up with, but yeah, it was wild. A lot of there's some cool synthesizer parts in there. A lot of 7. But I think if you wanted to learn this tune, you just take it section by section, and then the last section would be the hardest. It's doable. It's not crazy. It's not like Dream Theater or some kind of super crazy version of Return to Forever. But for, you know, Genesis is a progressive band. They're considered not just a rock band, but at that time they're just very progressive. It was before Invisible Touch, before the 80s, and it certainly was progressive. It's like they were all not much radio play, but that hook is very strong. But they decided to, you know, this song is 5-6 minutes long, you know. I'm glad it is. It takes patience to get through it. And speaking of Genesis, this is a great segue. Their first vocalist, Peter Gabriel. I'm going to play something off of his first album, and I bet you've never heard of it, and it's brilliant. This is his first solo album, and this was recorded in 1977. This song got some airplay back then, and but the main song off this album, his first solo album, was Salisbury Hill. But this one you didn't really hear much of, but I think this song is brilliant. There are a lot of chord changes in this one. And last week we spoke about songs that create a picture. This one really does for me. I can picture some person at a station with headphones on, and they're monitoring the sea. And it's like 2 a.m. in the morning or 3 a.m. and they're monitoring any signs of life in the sea, and it's all dark, and they're in this station, this kind of aquatic station, and he's got these screens in front of him, and he's monitoring if there's any life in the sea. And it's got that quiet, not eerie, but that quiet feeling to it. So I almost chose this as songs that paint a picture. But this one's also one that needs a lot more recognition because it didn't get that much airplay. And it's got some interesting modulations, and key changes and everything, and it's very emotional. So this is called Here Comes the Flood by Peter Gabriel from 1977.
When the night shows, the signals grow on radios. All the strange things, they come and go as early warnings. Stranded starfish have no place to hide, still waiting for the swollen Easter tide. There's no point in direction, we cannot even choose a side. Took the old track, the hollow shoulder across the waters. On the tall cliffs, they were getting older, sons and daughters. The jaded underworld was riding high. Waves of steel hurled metal at the sky. And as the nails sunk in the cloud, the rain was warm and soaked the crowd. Lord, here comes the flood. We will say goodbye to flesh and blood. If again the seas are silent in any still alive, it'll be those who gave their island to survive. Drink up, dreamers, you're running dry. When the flood calls, you have no home, you have no walls. In that thunder crash, you're 1,000 miles within a flash. Don't be afraid to cry at what you see. The actor's gone, there's only you and me. And if we break before the dawn, they'll use up what we used to be. Lord, here comes the flood. We will say goodbye to flesh and blood. If again the seas are silent in any still alive, it'll be those who gave their island to survive. Drink up, dreamers, you're running dry.
There it is. Do you like that? It just changes key at the last part.
Yeah, man. Very, very nice tune.
Have you heard it before?
I believe I have actually, but I can't remember when. Maybe you've played it for me before, but it sounds familiar. But this is a very, very beautiful tune. Yeah. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, it just, it does paint a picture for me. Yeah. And it is kind of true to its title. I just kind of, I could see like the seas rolling in, gray clouds overhead, and just kind of a somber scene.
Yeah, it's got when the night goes and distance grow on radios. And that first voicing that he uses is very interesting. I don't know if it's wrong, but let's listen to that very first part. We'll just switch around here. Tell me what you think of his voicing and just the first verse of it.
When the night shows, the signals grow on radios. All the strange things, they come and go as early warning.
That's interesting voicings there, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like some like a major 9 and minor 9 voicings, but with just like the 9 in there, and then maybe maybe the 9 and the 5 in the chord. So it sounds pretty open, but yet there's those 2 notes clustered together in the middle of the voicing. But yeah, it works.
It wouldn't get any airplay today because that intro is way too long, and it's just like has so much time to breathe, and then finally he comes in with a verse at the beginning. Yeah, so we're almost a minute in, and he's just starting to sing the verse. So yeah, another part of the song that's really interesting. Drink up, you dreamers, you're running dry. Especially at the end, that's interesting that he would use that for the ending. And it's in a different key, or he modulates somehow. Let's listen to the very ending again.
We will say goodbye to flesh and blood. If again the seas are silent in any still alive, it'll be those who gave their island to survive. Drink up, dreamers, you're running dry.
Yeah, it ends in like a major. Drink up, dreamers. And I like his piano voicings there as they go upward. It's pretty cool.
The changes actually remind me of a little bit of Blackbird, Paul McCartney.
Ah. Not too many years off, right? This is 77 and it's Beatles were the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But wow. If you think about, we just heard Genesis, and that was brilliant. Phil Collins and all those guys. And this was the lead singer of Genesis until he left. This is his first solo album, his first venture out. And it's such, for lack of a better word, mature songwriting. It's just way ahead of, he was young in 1977, obviously. And this is just, it's got a lot of, it builds, and it's got a lot of beautiful chord changes. And there's stuff there. He's felt. It's not a happy song.
No, yeah, it's there's a story behind it.
Yeah, it's you can take a lot away from the lyrics. You can take them literally, or you can take them to mean something else. There's a lot of different interpretations you can give this, but I mean, it's not a hit song though, unfortunately. It doesn't seem like it would be. It's got too much stuff going on. It's got, but this is always one of my favorites way back in the 90s when I heard it first. But yeah, beautiful songwriting. And all those guys in Genesis are just, even when they branched off to do their solo stuff, they're just brilliant.
Yeah, and as you said, it's just interesting the connection that these musicians in that era seem to have with each other, and playing together, being in the same bands, and so there's just like this strand of artistry and just skillfulness in terms of their ability to write songs, to play instruments, and it was very much a culture of the time, and there was a lot of give and take in this culture, and I think that energy just really helped to create a lot of interesting music. Those collaborations, just people being influenced from one another, and it really, I think that's part of the reason why I think you have so much interesting music, because you had these really great and talented people that were collaborating with each other, but even when they weren't collaborating directly, they were listening to each other and they were being inspired, and it was really motivating them to create new music, and to really keep upping their game as well. You know, I mean, it was like, wow, this is a great song, and it's, you know, it was kind of like a friendly competition almost. You know, well, I'm going to write a great song now, and I remember reading about Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys, right? And Paul McCartney, and how, you know, Brian Wilson was just really blown away by the Beatles. And I think the White Album was one that really inspired him.
So Brian Wilson and Paul McCartney had like a friendly rivalry going on?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it, I mean, it wasn't exactly a rivalry, because they really respected each other. And so Brian Wilson was just enamored with the Beatles. It really inspired him. And then when he created the album Pet Sounds, word has it that Paul McCartney basically said, he's got me, you know, like, yeah, I mean, Paul McCartney just really, really respected, word has it that Paul McCartney really liked that album a lot. And in particular, he, what was the God Only Knows, I think, is the track that Paul McCartney really liked the most. That for him, he felt like God Only Knows was just, it was a perfect song, and Paul McCartney described it as such, that it was just like, this is the perfect song. So so it's just interesting to see how these artists, these really incredible forward-thinking artists, inspired each other, and I think that you kind of hear that here with Genesis, GTR, Peter Gabriel, and Phil Collins.
I think let's say there's a band like Genesis, and at least two of them make solo albums, and they're both great, Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel. Then Mike Rutherford makes some cool stuff too, but today it's almost unheard of. Like when there's like a boy band or some kind of band, and this person makes a solo album, usually it doesn't quite work. Sometimes it does, but not very often. So, but for both of these artists, like Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins, to make solo albums after that, after Genesis, and they're all brilliant. All of their solo albums are incredible. This shows how strong within one band, how great they were. So,
well, I'm going to play something.
ooh,
and
you thought of something cool.
I did.
All
I
right.
did. I've got something.
Inspiration. That's what we're all about.
Indeed. And I'm going in a completely different direction here, I'll just tell you. And this is something that's more recent. And this is the song I'm going to play for you is probably one of this artist's better known songs, but I think this artist is also not super well known, and his music is not super well known. And the name of the artist is Thundercat. Are you familiar with Thundercat?
I am.
Yeah, Thundercat is a bassist. And this particular song features some icons of the 70s and the 80s. And I'll talk more about that after I play the song. All right, some guest artists on there.
Yeah, Michael McDonald.
And Kenny
That's a
Loggins.
cool- Oh, okay. It's got that sound. It's got that retro sound, even though it's modern. They totally got that retro sound to it. I dig that, man. That's really hip. That's an homage to those guys making a track like that. And that's just, the whole thing was beautifully played. Very soulful, early 80s, maybe even late 70s, and the mix was beautiful. Great bass playing on it, obviously. But I never heard that before. That's cool.
Now, this is another one that I just stumbled across when I was living in China, and I was actually in Suzhou at the time, and I was just checking out some shows from the US because, you know, got to have your fix when you're living in China. Sometimes you got to have your fix and watch some shows from the US. Right. And so I was watching The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and the guest artist was Thundercat. And he had both Kenny Loggins and Michael McDonald there performing with him. And they did this song. Cool. And I heard it and I was like, oh my gosh, man, this is nice. This is nice. I mean, what a treat to hear that on The Tonight Show with those artists. And so, yeah, after hearing that, I was sold. I got that Thundercat album right away and just checked out the whole album. And there's some other good stuff on the album, but this is the best track on the album. It is the best track on the album. It is the best one. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great sounding track, beautifully recorded. And you wonder how they got the sound of the early 80s in there. And no wonder they had those guys as guest singers on there, because that's their sound. That was the sound of the time when they recorded and when the songs were big hits. And it fit beautifully. Just, I think maybe he does a lot of production, Thundercat does, but
yeah,
if he does, he's brilliant. Not only a brilliant bass player, but just there's a bit of human in there, little humor in that track as well.
Yeah,
I could tell he was saying stuff on there. Yeah. That was great. You need that sometimes, and not something not taking itself too seriously.
Most definitely. And the thing they did different on the live version that they didn't do on this particular track was Thundercat had a bass solo at the end, and he took it. Man, he played some nice stuff. It fit really well. I mean, I kind of wish.
He's a great player.
Yeah, I kind of wish he had on the studio album, because what he played on the live version is really fit. It was really nice for the song, and they ended the song with a bit more power at the end of it, and I really liked the way they ended it. So it's just interesting to hear sometimes how the live versions are so different.
Yeah, it's cool how they add more solos usually, and if the songs are longer on the live version, you hope. So that's cool. Yeah, never heard that song before, but thanks for sharing it. Yeah, that's cool. All right, we got time for one more?
We got one. Yeah, we got time for another one.
All right. This is a tune by Tears for Fears called The Working Hour. And I believe the album is called Songs from the Big Chair, and it's probably one of their best-selling albums. This was in the mid-'80s. And I remember that the song The Working Hour was the second track on the whole album. And it was supposed to be a hit, but other songs became a hit, like Shout, Head Over Heels. All those other songs became bigger hits than this one. This was supposed to be a big hit, but I still like it a lot. Because it has saxophone, it's got a little bit of soprano, mostly alto, and it's got an interesting modulation in there. So this is called The Working Hour, and it starts out with just saxophone, just kind of improvising, which is very unusual. Maybe that's why it didn't get it wasn't the hit song that it was supposed to be. So this is called The Working Hour. great tune. Ends with a cool saxophone line there. Isn't that cool? Those guitars, even though they're not distorted, they're huge sounding.
Yeah, and it's kind of a rhythm guitar pattern. I like that rhythm guitar pattern. That ba ba da ba da ba da bum bum. It's almost like an Asian kind of,
Yeah,
kind of a
you
motif.
hear at the beginning they're playing like this pentatonic thing on the keyboard.
Yeah,
And there's some programmed things. There's some programmed bass in there, and some programmed synths, and a little bit of programmed percussion, along with killer drums and a killer guitar sound, and a great saxophone solo. It's not Kenny Garrett, but it's like works for the tune.
and there's some pretty ripping stuff in that solo as well. I mean, there's some stuff in there, man. It's really, it was nice.
Yeah, it's very 80s, a lot of reverb, but it's a great combination of programmed stuff with the live stuff, and beautifully produced. And it was supposed to be their big hit, because the second, usually when the CDs came out, the second one was supposed to be the hit, the second song on the list, and it never. It does a lot of saxophone in this, and the intro is just long. It's a long intro, and then the interesting modulation in there.
Yeah, I definitely caught that. It was like,
Whoa.
yeah, it was a bit of a curveball. I knew there was going to be a modulation because you mentioned it, but when I heard it, it was like, whoa, okay. That wasn't going where I expected it to go.
Yeah, it's this is a great track. I've always loved this track. I want to play it live. I want to play with a band that does this, but this is not their popular tune. Unfortunately, they have all those other head over heels, shout, shout, shout. That's a great produced tune. It's just a bit too repetitive for me. This was also repetitive. Shout is very kind of almost hypnotic, and
It has a clearer hook as well, and that's why it's a hit.
Yeah, this one's a bit darker. This one's a little darker, but I love the fact that it's got saxophone throughout. They do not skimp on the saxophone.
Yeah, definitely, and I like I like the sound of it. I like that they do get this big sound, and I like the guitar motif really works. Yeah, and they've got some nice pads in there as well. It's a really nice sound. Yeah, and I would love to hear a live version of this too. I bet this would be a song that would allow to go some different directions as well in a live version as well.
Yeah, I don't know. There probably is, and that would be like a great saxophone feature. And yeah, this is a song that could lend itself, as you say, to extended solos, and this could be like a 10-minute song, and it would still be interesting, and it would be very creative and artistic. And this is Tears for Fears. I mean, they're great songwriters. They're that album, Songs from the Big Chair, is beautifully produced. Great keyboard sounds, a great blend of live and programmed instruments. And if I'm nothing against programmed instruments if they blend it beautifully with the live instruments, and if it's done in an artistic way, and clearly it was. And when you heard that guitar motif you're singing, da 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 da, that's a beautiful guitar sound. That clean sound is huge. So beautifully recorded, and I wish this was more of a hit because it's got a saxophone in it. But yeah, have you heard that song before?
I have not. No, I haven't heard this one.
Whoa.
Yeah. So yeah,
and it was supposed to be their main hit on their biggest album. So
goes to figure. Sometimes it just works out the way it works out. And sometimes it's radio stations. They hear a song that to them just sticks out more than the others, and that's the one that they play.
I think they did play this to a point, but nothing compared to their other hits.
And maybe the other songs, And maybe the other songs were the ones that the listeners were calling in and requesting, and that oftentimes is a hint for them, the ones that people want to hear. Back in the days before we couldn't just get whatever song we want on our iPhone. Nowadays, I guess what determines a hit is how many hits a song gets, how many people listen to it. But in those days, it was largely what people would call in and request on the radio stations, or what singles would sell. But yeah, I mean, I'd imagine that this song for me, what's most memorable about this song is that guitar line. That's the hook for the song. I didn't really hear anything melodically that really was memorable, that stood out.
That's a great saxophone line. That's very melodic.
And I think as musicians, those are the types of elements that stick out to us more than they do for regular people. I think for most listeners that don't play music, they look for a hook that is melodic and has a lyric that is really catchy. Mm-hmm. And so that's that. I think that's probably explains why. And also the long intro. Yeah, it takes a while for the song to get into it. And so there definitely, maybe there was a radio friendly version of this that shortened the intro.
Now that you mention it, it's interesting what you said, that when, let's say, the record the radio station and the record company would play a few songs from push a few songs from the album, and then if the listeners would call in and request other songs, then they would play those other songs. But I think, have you ever heard a song that maybe initially you didn't love? You liked it, but it took a while for you to like it, and when it did, it really built up, and then you really liked it, but right away you didn't love it. Maybe it took a while. Maybe it took a bit of patience. There's so many great tunes that have done that for me. And I wish the radio stations would, like back in the 80s, would have done that too. Because maybe a song like this would have been more popular.
Possibly. I mean, I got to say, for me, those songs that grew on me were other songs on an album that I bought for a different song. You know what I mean? Because I would listen to the whole album and I would listen to it over and over again. And then certain songs that maybe I didn't really take note of before as much, or that just didn't have the immediate attraction, hearing them again and again, those songs would grow on me more. I mean, a lot of Beatles albums, there's a lot of great songs and really catchy songs on Beatles albums, but some songs, hearing them a few times, they really kind of grew on me over time. Definitely a lot of jazz albums.
Yeah.
Hearing a song first time, maybe it didn't say anything, but after hearing it a couple times, I start to notice things that I didn't notice before. Queen as well. I remember the first Queen album was a greatest hits album, and the one I wanted to hear was the one that was on Wayne's World, Bohemian Rhapsody.
That's a great tune.
But then listening to the album, there were some other songs I wasn't too sure, but then I started to understand kind of that vocal harmony, and then I was like, oh, Killer Queen, that's a great song.
Brilliant, isn't it? Yeah.
Bicycle, right? Bicycle Race.
Yep. Bicycle. I want. They're in terms of Queen, they're just, you can't put they're rock. They're like heavy rock, and they're also opera. And they're also, what is Bicycle? What is that song? What style is that?
Yeah, you can't pin them down. Queen is Queen.
Yeah.
It's almost like opera rock or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I really think that the fact that we don't listen to whole albums anymore is kind of a shame, because that is really how you start to get into the music, how you get to have the opportunity for those songs to grow on you. And now we've lost our attention span. So if the first few seconds of a song doesn't grab you, and you notice that's what all the songs do nowadays. Nowadays all the songs, they're trying to grab you within the first few seconds. And so they put it all out there. Oftentimes the chorus is the first thing you hear before the verse even, because they want to get the hook in your ear as quickly as they can. And it's a shame because you know you don't have the same kind of song constructions. Like I was saying, like I was listening to that James Taylor album, Walking Man. You know, not every song has a hook in the traditional sense, but it's a good song and it's an interesting melody. And some of the songs do have hooks, but maybe they don't throw it out there right at the beginning. You know, it takes a while to get into it. And it's
true that in the 70s and the 80s and 90s, they gave, let's say, an artist that they signed at least a few albums to kind of get better at their craft. But nowadays, you got one shot. If you don't, you know, get as many hits on Spotify or whatever, then that's it. But before, you know, years ago, you had artists that they developed, that the record label developed. They took time with, and they knew it took 2 or 3 albums for them to finally get. And then within the song, as you said, they don't always go to the chorus right away, and there's longer intros. It's like this whole thing that us as a culture, we're too much in a hurry in terms of, we got to get to it. If we don't like it, no, turn it off. We have access to too many things too fast.
Yes, and that's made the construction of the songs change, because it used to be that it was desirable to build up to something, right? It used to be that it was desirable that you're building it up slowly, taking your time, and then bam, there's this climax of the song that makes it all worth it, and there it is. And nowadays it's all kind of backward. You know, it's like it's got to get into that pumping beat and that catchy hook right away, because you want that person to listen to it, and you want them to stay on it, you know, and it's changed the way that we've listened to music, and I don't feel that it's changed it for the better, you know.
Yeah. And this song is called On to the Next One, On to the Next One, On to the Next One, this one's called On to the Next One.
Yeah.
2 minutes later, On to the Next One. And that one's forgotten. Now on to the next one. That's what we're all about.
And we've talked about the album concept too. I mean, the great thing about an album is that, first of all, like a broader story can be told with an album. You know, the artist takes you through different for different parts of themselves, different emotions, different parts of their story. And so the album itself is a journey. And you know, when I was a young man, you know, I had a stereo system, and I would sit there with my eyes closed and just listen, and just really listen, you know, not just kind of in the background, or not in my headphones as I'm doing something else, you know. But I would just like sit there and actively listen to the music, and there's a real joy in doing that. Mm-hmm. And it's a joy that I fear that the younger generations are not experiencing. They're not getting the opportunity to experience that joy. It's almost like they don't even realize that joy exists, that it can be out there. The joy of listening to a whole album and all these stories, and it's like going to an art gallery, you know. And when you're in an art gallery, you get to spend time with a vision of different artists and just enjoy their work and take it in. And a museum is a great place because, you know, it's just designed for that purpose. And people go there and they take time. Well, hopefully they take time to just take it in and enjoy it. And there's not really a place so much to do that with music. I mean, I guess you could go to a concert, or you can go to a club and listen to music in a club. You know, there is live music, but for music, it's been more of like the home art gallery of music, where you had your record collection, and you just took it in and you spent time and enjoyed it. And it's such a joy in that. And to me,
well said. Yeah. So yeah, I think that part of our brain, when we don't do that enough, is lost. Like it's been the longest time since I can't remember when I last heard a whole album. And that's using a different, it literally feels like I'm using a different part of my brain. And yeah.
Yeah, that's how Well, that's how I
Fair
felt
access.
when I went back and listened to that James Taylor album. You know, I was just I really enjoyed that experience of just hearing every track, and I was looking forward to the next one. Oh, what's he got for me next? What's oh, that's nice. Oh yeah, oh, okay, yeah. You know, it's exciting to hear. What are you going to show me next? What do you got for me next? It's so much fun.
Yeah, I think it's I'm too impatient now. I think you should just like, I should listen to a whole album and just force myself to listen to the whole thing and be patient with it. I've lost my patience. And I could gain it back, and then that other part of my brain that was asleep can wake up again. And with the youth of today, they don't access that part of their brain anymore, or I don't think they have. But that gives me a great idea for another podcast. Is what you mentioned is songs that initially we didn't love, that we grew to love because we gave it time. And maybe we shouldn't just choose like these weird jazz songs, but we can choose like not pop, could be pop, but could be a jazz song, but not all jazz tune. I know it's called jazz hands, but I think it would be a great idea if we went over like we chose 2 or 3 songs that initially we just didn't really thought that were great, and then we skipped over them, but somehow we came back to them, and then we're glad we did, and then now they're probably our favorite songs. And I know there's a bunch for me that did that. Initially it didn't have an impact, but then later on it's like, wow, why did I skip over this?
Yeah, I've definitely got songs for me. Yeah, definitely.
That'd be so interesting.
All right, that's our next episode. We will talk about songs that grew on us.
Yes. Ooh, good title.
All right, and with that is the end of our show for today. We thank you so much for listening. We hope that you heard something you didn't hear before. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and also please do like this video. It helps us. We're looking forward to talking to you next time on Jazz Hands.